Alright, so I'm going into EOL number 9. So it goes on to talk more about assessment, monitoring, and evaluating strategies. So as we know, collecting objective assessment information and monitoring behavior is kind of time consuming and can be hard, but it is necessary. We do have to embrace it into our classroom. So there's reasons for measuring behavior, one being to provide pre-intervention information about behavior, and objective assessment of conditions that influence the behavior and baseline levels of the behavior. 2, to set ambitious yet realistic goals for the student, and 3, to evaluate short and long-term goals, progress toward goals. So after this target behavior is operationalized, it's time to determine how the behavior will be measured, which is why we go into doing that. So selecting the measurement and monitoring procedure is a task, but it's kind of easy if you view it as direct and indirect types. So direct is objective. Direct observation would be an example of this. And then if you're counting the number of all the call-outs during math class, for instance, that would be direct observation. So then there's also indirect, and this is subjective. And it could be like an interview, a daily behavior report card. An example of this would be rating a student's behavior in class on a 1 to 10 scale. So when it comes to a referral reason in the classroom, if it's an academic concern, we can monitor progress through curriculum-based assessments, tests, quizzes, and work samples. If it's a behavioral concern, this is going to be divided up into low-stakes behaviors and high-stake behaviors. So if it's a low-stake behavior, indirect method is normally the tool to help. But if it's a high-stake behavior, direct observation is more the said measure that might be taken. So observed behaviors are considered to be either continuous, having meaningful duration, or discrete, having sudden onset or offset, which would be an example of like calling out or kicking. And then for observed, it would be like being off task or out of your seat. So there are several direct observation techniques that this article discussed, and then there's several indirect. So for direct observation techniques, we talked a lot about these in EOL number 8. It's like evidence-based recording, which is a technique best used when the behavior is discrete, so having a relatively clear onset and offset. Then there's the narrative ABC record, and we've learned a lot about that in class. And then the frequency count, which a frequency count technique simply entails counting that behavior each time it occurs during the observation period. And then a behavior log and scatter plot, you basically are marking the child's behavior onto a scatter plot, and you can study the progress from there. And then interval sampling, as we talked about in EOL number 8 too, there's several types of it. So then for indirect techniques, this would be a self-report or rating by others, and then a daily behavior report card. So for my conclusions, what I drew from this is I feel like direct techniques are kind of harder to put in the classroom and harder to do, but indirect is a little easier to do. But obviously, if the behavior is more disruptive, then technically we're going to have to go the direct route. So there's actually a chart we can use. I really enjoyed it, looking at it, for intensive interventions. It basically says, can the behavior occur under certain circumstances following certain other behaviors or in response to a certain stimuli is the first branch, and then you say yes, no, and the questions go from there. So that is a tool we could use in the classroom.